Not every great business is built to be seen. Some scale by becoming the engine behind others. Angelie Dhillon runs one of those. She helped spin Blue Elephant Media out of a larger agency and simplified the model, improved the margins, and made the business easier to run. This one's about winning through execution, not attention. I'm Bryon Morrison. Let's get to the leaders list.
Everything is happening through these screens.
How are we getting the most out of that person?
I want to see this thing grow long term.
Amazing story. You have such a unique perspective on that.
Schedule a 2-week vacation.
I applied those models.
Undervalue.
Secure your digital footprint as well.
Why were they even put in place in the first place?
Only the most adaptable survive. Let's get to the leaders list. Angelie Dhillon of Blue Elephant Media, welcome to the leaders list.
Thank you so much, Bryon, and thank you for clarifying how you pronounce your name, because I was struggling a little bit with that at the beginning.
I know that you've never had to deal with that, but I know just because my mother was creative, that shouldn't be penalizing everybody else in the world. So,
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
yeah, well, we are thrilled to have you. You have such an interesting story, and one that I think is really unique as a mother. You're from Puerto Rico. You have, interesting travel life, and most importantly, you are also incredibly successful in a new role as CEO of Blue Elephant Media. I say new, but I mean a few years in. So we would love to get kind of an overview first on what Blue Elephant Media is, and then we'll talk about that journey that got you there.
Absolutely. You mentioned something that most people don't realize about me, which is I am a Latina. You don't realize that because of my last name, but yes, I am originally from Puerto Rico, fluent in Spanish, born and raised over there all my life. But going back to Blue Elephant Media, we are a white labeled media company based in Austin, Texas. And we do everything from paid media to the strategy, the planning, the execution, the media buying. And then we also do the reporting and analytics. So we are what we like to say an agency for other agencies. We primarily partner with marketing agencies who need a little bit of extra help when it comes to the media execution part. So in a very concise nutshell, that is who we are.
That's perfect. And you took the natural path to running an agency. You started by teaching. Is that right?
Natural. I would say that's the typical case.
That's how everybody does
Yeah,
it.
I that is actually my background. I studied to become a teacher. I did teach for a few years, and then I moved to Houston, moved to the nonprofit sector, worked there for a while as a fundraiser, which is where I actually realized that I was good at sales. And then, COVID hit and everybody wanted to do something different with their life. So I decided to go for my MBA and I started working with the startup world. And here I am today.
That's awesome. And so when you joined the organization, just talk a little bit about. I thought it was so fascinating when you and I were talking about the idea that you were in a group, you were working on data analytics, that got spread into several different places. And so that organization got to a point where you were having challenges with sales and scaling. And so you guys decided to start developing individual specialist brands. And I think this is so interesting because there's just such a clear example of, when you can focus your energies, good things happen. And so talk a little bit about that transition from the original founders and owners to what you guys are doing today.
Yeah, I love to tell this story. So I started working, this was 2021. Again, right after COVID, or kind of in the middle still. I started working with a company called Predictive Data Lab, also based in Austin, and they were focused on doing consumer research and data science for marketing agencies. And at the time, it was a very small startup company. We scaled it. We started doing a little bit of paid media because the clients that we had at that time needed that. Then we also started to do a little bit of engineering and AI development in-house. And so we, at some point, were doing a little bit of everything, which is, like you mentioned, it made it a little bit harder for us to scale because it was hard to define what was our expertise, right? So in 2023, 2024, we decided, okay, I think we need to kind of carve out the media team and turn it into its own agency or its own entity, which is how Blue Elephant Media was born. And so I'm leading that one. Then we carved out the engineering team and we formed a different entity for that. And so to this day, we have 4 to 5 different entities, if you will,
Hmm.
that are in a startup phase, kind of developing. So it has turned into some sort of incubator for startup companies, which is very exciting.
And how large did the original company get? Just give us an idea of what stage it got to before you guys decided to start splintering off.
Yeah, it grew both in terms of clients. We kind of tripled the number of clients that we had initially. We tripled the amount of revenue, so we were making, I would say, around 1.5 back in 2020, 2021. We scaled that to almost 12 million. And so our team went from 3 to 4 people initially when I joined to 30 people. So yeah, the difference was pretty significant in terms of the growth. And it was also pretty evident that we needed to be a little bit more niche if we wanted to grow at the individual level.
Well, so that was Predictive Lab, Data Lab got to that point,
Mhm.
and I think that's pretty interesting because if you that's some pretty extreme growth that you were just talking about. So
Yeah.
most people would say, "Oh, we are on the right path. We look great. We're going to continue doing business as we are."
Yeah.
What was it specifically that made everybody start to recognize we would be better off if we split this up into a portfolio of companies?
I think there were a couple of things, but I would say the main thing is realizing that media itself is such a technical and
Mm.
um, big and important arm of the marketing as a whole. So we identified the gap as we were working with these marketing organizations. We kept getting more and more requests of, hey, can you run this media for us? Can you run this media for us?
Yeah.
Until we reach a point where we said, okay, this is its own thing. And by specializing a little bit more, we can be really, really good at that one thing
Yeah.
rather than trying to do everything under the sun and struggling with scaling and struggling with deliverables and things like that. So deciding to be really good at one thing rather than trying to do everything was kind of the key um, component there that made us move that in that direction.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it was the complexity of the offering and being able to have a great offering made you
Mhm.
start to realize if we're really going to do this and do it right, we have to specialize.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it has been working very well for us. Like I said, we are white labeled, so we work with agencies as a really an extension of their team. And it's typically when, they work with RFPs and they sometimes get new clients out of nowhere, and they don't have the bandwidth. So that's really where we come in, and it's been working wonders for us.
Well, and it makes sense that you would recognize a gap in your offering, especially when you're behind the scenes to supposed pros, right?
Mhm.
These are people who are already experts in marketing, so you can't be kind of good at what you do if you're going to be the behind the scenes solution for them or the white label solution. So that made perfect sense. And then you mentioned that your success that you've had, it's pretty fantastic. In just a couple of years, you've managed to take this from absolutely nothing to tell us a little bit about your growth stage that you're in right now, just with Blue Elephant.
We are learning as we go, really. And the reason why I say that is because working with marketing agencies, we have learned that no agency is the same. They all have different needs. They all have different ways to operate. Um, for example, I say that we're white label because I think 80-90% of the clients that we have prefer to be served as us being white label, but we also have some agencies that are the opposite, and they tell us, no, we want to disclose everything to the client because we like transparency. So just little nuances like that. It's really scaling an agency like this takes a lot of relationship building and conversations to really understand what it is that the agency needs. Where are the gaps? Is it the reporting that is lacking? Is it the targeting, and they need a little bit of help with the data science and the targeting? So that's kind of where we are. We've refined our offerings a lot since we started, just working with other agencies. But the growth is really great. I like the direction that we're heading. We have an amazing team. We are lean, but we're highly effective. So I think part of the growth is hiring the right people, and people who are highly capable and experts in what they do. So yeah, we're doing great.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, when you came into the organization, the prior organization, and they're starting at 1.5 million, something like that. You grew that pretty tremendously. Now you're able to do, just in the media area, you've got, I think you're coming up on 15 employees or something like that. And your ability to keep scaling that, and it's more clear exactly what you offer. And you're able to find practitioners probably easier. And so your ability to continue to grow this is pretty exciting. So what has been the biggest challenge for you in this growth mode? Because that's getting to 15 employees in a couple of years
Yeah.
is pretty great.
Yeah, I would say one challenge, which is also I would say a blessing and a curse, is that we're 100% remote. So I know
Hmm.
there's a lot of debate everywhere on LinkedIn and social media about whether or not you can, keep an effective team 100% remote. I think we are extremely effective, but the part that I believe is challenging is just not having that in-person interaction, right? Because we're all over the nation, different time zones, things like that. So a blessing because we have the flexibility, occurs because we would love to spend more time with each other. And that's the part that gets a little bit sticky there. Um, Challenges, learning who is your ideal client, and who to say no to. I think is very important. Not everyone is going to be a good fit, and that's okay. So turning away business can be a good strategy for growth if you know how to identify those things, right? So that's something that we have been narrowing down when it comes to establishing new partners. Sometimes they can have a great budget, but it's not a great fit. It's not what we
Yeah.
want. It's not what we do. So learning how to say no to certain opportunities is, I think, very important. The other
Hmm.
thing, I would say in terms of operations is, there's this thing called efficiency matrix, I believe it's called. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's basically a quadrant that says,
The
the
Eisenhower matrix.
I believe it's that one, the one that says, like high efficiency or high impact. I can't remember the words, but we've been using that a lot to essentially cut down on accounts and campaigns that are high maintenance but very low impact. So I think scope creep is a very real thing for marketing agencies and for media as
Yeah.
well. So just keeping a close eye on those things and making sure that you're keeping an eye on your margins and you're putting your effort where there's opportunity for growth and scaling a partnership. It's very important.
Yeah. So the efficiency matrix, I thought you were talking about for personal planning like the Eisenhower matrix, but basically it's four quadrants that focus on whether you're able to thrive, if the work is putting you in a position to die slowly, die quickly, or just survive. And so it's effectiveness and efficiency, looking at that balance.
Yeah, so essentially you want to stay within the quadrants that are low effort, high impact. So you have,
Yep.
you know, a client that is low effort, but it's giving you 80% of your revenue. And sometimes you can make exceptions and go with a high effort, high impact account, which is maybe your biggest client, which is very high maintenance, but it's giving you a really big chunk of your revenue. So you want
Yeah.
to stay away from those that are high effort, low impact type of account. So that's that's something that has worked really well for us because I really do believe that new business is important, but keeping your current clients and partnerships happy and growing those partnerships also is extremely important. So you gotta, you know, find a balance between the two.
Yeah. So what would you say is on your leaders list right now? What are the things that you're focused on?
For Blue Elephant specifically,
Yeah. Yeah, for growing Blue Elephant at this stage that you're in, what's the primary initiatives you're going to do this year?
one of the biggest one is diversifying in terms of the verticals that we serve. And the reason why I'm saying that is because we um, we came out from that Predictive Data Lab company, which was very, very focused on destination marketing and tourism,
Okay.
hotels, entertainment, attractions, those type of clients. So obviously, the big bulk of our clients that we advertise for are also in that same kind of industry. So now a big focus for us this year is to start working with different clients. So let's work with more banks and retail and e-commerce and different types of clients because really what we do can be applied to pretty much any industry. So that's the number one goal for us this year.
That makes sense. Okay, so you're heavily focused on the business development process and building out. Would you say you have a sales and marketing engine in place at this point, or is that the will of a few?
Yeah, that was one of the first thing we did when we were still very small. We invested heavily on sales. So we hire salespeople and sales leaders who could help develop really from the ground up the sales processes, the tools, the workflows, everything, the positioning, the ideal customer profiles, everything. And so that alone took at least, I don't know, a year. Because it does take time. But once you have it in place, it just starts working, you know, for you instead of you working for, you know, building the system. So we have the systems in place, and we also have a sales team. We have a business development reps, and we have a head of partnerships, which is solely focused is to just build relationships with these marketing agencies.
Yeah, I love it. And it's interesting because most agencies are so focused on brands. What they're focused on is building their own brands
Yeah.
and getting their name out there. But it's really interesting just coming at this from a different perspective of visibility.
Yeah.
And so, how do you keep the team focused? Because there's got to be opportunities where they go, we can just go direct to clients,
Mm.
to client brands, and we could work with them. How do you keep everybody focused?
Um, because we've tried that. In the past. We did reach that point where we're like, well, why don't we go with direct clients? But what we found is that there's a lot of overlap between us, the client, and the marketing agency. Rather than us working well, it created more friction. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was the account management load is so heavy. We would require an account management team of
Yeah.
people to really keep the client happy and serve the client. So it was an additional investment in that. So we did try it. Immediately we realized it that model was not going to work. So we
Yeah.
decided to shift, and instead we are working with the marketing agency. They handle the client. We are behind the
Yep.
scenes executing, providing all the data and everything that they need behind the scenes. But we don't touch the client itself unless there's a situation where the agency really wants us to jump in. But in a nutshell, that's the reason.
No, that's good to hear because a lot of people don't realize that the account management function is a real job, a full-time job.
Oh yeah.
For most agencies, that's actually the part that clients really are looking for. Of course, they want the specialty and the expertise and the practitioners,
Mhm.
but there is a point where when you get large enough, you need to have someone who's a great integrator who understands business strategy, understands what that individual, the marketing lead's personal interests are, and then what the company interests are, and how they balance those, and all of those things that's a full-time job.
Yep.
So I can absolutely understand why you would go, you know what, let's leave that to the agencies and we'll just be great at what we do.
Yeah, yeah. It's a full-time job and a tough one too. It's very demanding. And then the other reason is because we noticed that that's not really what the agencies needed. What they needed was
Hmm.
a partner, an extra set of hands that they can say, "Hey, we got this campaign request. We don't have bandwidth. Can you do it?" Um, and nobody in our team is trying to get credit or being like, hey, we need to make sure that they know it was us. Nobody has that mindset. Everybody is mostly driven to do a good job. So I think they get rewarded by just doing a good job and doing it well, and that's like kind of an intrinsic type of motivation, right? And I think
Yeah.
everyone has a very similar mindset in our company.
Well, that is a very different hire. I can tell you from, my organization Proxy, we work behind the scenes with organizations and leaders, and we find the exact same thing. You literally have to hire to that
Mhm.
kind of non-ego driven, finding joy in other people's success. Like that is something you literally have to try and hire to. So
Yeah.
clearly you've done a good job with that. That's great.
Yeah.
Um, so what's the how are you protecting your own margins and keeping yourself from being commoditized? Because agencies can be notorious for learning how to do something for a while and then saying, well, I think I can just do that myself. So how do you make sure that you really do have a good partnership? Like you said that there's some that you've identified that you can just tell it's not going to be a good relationship. What are some of those indicators?
Uh, Well, I can give you a really good example that just happened a few weeks ago. It was this really good lead we had, but once we had the conversation with the agency, they wanted a partner who could only do traditional media for them. We don't do traditional. We try to stay very much focused on everything that is digital.
Okay.
So this was a perfect example where the client had a great budget, they had the need, but the fit was not there.
Hmm.
We could always say, oh, it's okay. We can start doing traditional just to please this client and follow the dollars, right? But the consequences that is going to have long term on the team and the margins in terms of labor versus revenue are way too high for us to pay that price. And I say that because I mentioned scope creep earlier. That is one thing that you know, as a CEO, you have to keep an eye on. How much time and effort is your team putting into these projects versus what we're getting in terms of revenue? So that's one thing to point out. And then can you repeat the question? Because I know there was like a
Well,
two.
yeah, I screwed you up. So just going back to how do you know what are the long-term indicators
Mhm.
that tell you whether or not it's going to be a good relationship? One, as you just mentioned, is whether or not the skill set's there.
Yeah.
Like you don't try and become something that you're not. So you know the riches are in the niches, so you stay very focused on that.
Hmm. Hmm.
What about the cultural aspects? Like, is that something where you can look at a company and go, I know this is not going to work?
Sometimes, yes, that plays a role sometimes. And it's something that I always try to keep my eye on. So what we try to do before we establish a formal partnership with a client, and I think this is something that every business owner and you know, CEO or leader should implement in their own strategies, is let's do a test. We're gonna do a test campaign. We're gonna run it. We're gonna report on it. We're going to work with you from the beginning until the very end. And that is our way for not only them to test us and see if they like the relationship and the way that we work, but also for us to test how we work together with them. That is the time where if we identify any red flags in terms of the communication or the culture, like you mentioned, anything like that, then we talk about it as a team. Because the last thing I want is for us to establish a partnership with an agency that is going to be a nightmare to work with, and then kind of get stuck with that. So that is, I think, a strategy that we use and has been working very well for us.
How often do you get in, do a pilot, and then find, oh yeah, this isn't going to work? Because that's a pretty big lift, right? It might be fine for you, but for the agency, they look at this and they go, no, we like Angelie, we like the team, so we're going to invest in this.
Mm-hmm.
But then if the pilot doesn't go well,
Mm-hmm.
that's a painful process. So how do you do your best to get through those pilots successfully?
Yeah, that's a great question. It doesn't happen often, but if it does happen, we sit down and we have a conversation about it. We do kind of a post-mortem of the
Hmm.
campaign that we just ran, and we say, hey, these are the things that work really well. This is where we really loved working with you, and these are the things that don't really align. And then we take it from there. Do they want to continue to, you know, work together or not? If it's something that is raising some concerns for us, then let's do another test. Maybe it was that particular client they were working with that was putting a lot of pressure on them, and the pressure was getting transferred to us. So we have to look at it from different sides, but it doesn't happen very often. Typically, when we run a campaign, everybody's happy. We talk about it and we move on with other campaigns. But you know, I haven't seen a case where we tell them, you know what, this is not gonna work. So hopefully, I'm gonna knock on wood so that doesn't happen.
All right. Well, it can happen, but all right. So at this point in the show, what I like to do is you've given us a ton of information about you, the organization, just about how and where Blue Elephant Media is. Now I'm kind of interested in speaking to our audience. What are the things that you've learned that you feel like ought to be on their leaders list? What are the things that we should do from a perspective of building and scaling a company as a spin out? You could handle it from that perspective because I think everybody is. I know lots and lots of clients get to a point where they go, I think I could build a different company or a separate company, and they want to go down that path. So I'm curious if there's anything that you would give as, best practices that you could share with us that we should put on our leaders list if we are considering something like that.
So you're asking me as a company who came out of another company?
Mm-hmm.
And I think one very important and difficult thing is to recognize that you don't need to do things the same way that that previous company was doing things. You now have
Mhm.
ownership and free will to establish your own processes, your own systems, dictate your target market. Who do you want as a client? Who do you not want as a client? So I think that partition can sometimes be a little hard if you are experiencing that, because you kind of want to go back to, "Well, we kind of always did it that way. Are we continuing to do it that way, or are we changing?" Um, Changing is important because now you are your own thing, right? Now you are leading something that it's it's by itself, it's standalone, and you need to put a lot of thought into how do you want to now grow that specific area of the business, if you will. So doing that, I think, can sometimes be challenging because as humans, we always want to go back to that comfort zone of, oh, we can just keep doing things this way. But sometimes you need to change in order to really grow.
Well, that also puts a lot of onus on the founders of other companies. If they are going to do something like this, they have to give up some of that control.
Yeah.
And that's very, very hard for some people. So, how did you work that out with the owners of the previous firm?
I have been blessed enough to have a very good group of business partners. So Carlos Casas is the founder of Predictive Data Lab. And ever since I started working with Predictive Data Lab, he always told me, you're gonna lead the company one day. I want to pass this on to you. And I didn't really see how that was gonna happen. It was one of those things that you just listen to it and you're like, okay, sure, whatever, you know. But it did happen, and it happened in a way that I could not foresee at that time. But because he already had a lot of trust in me and the work that I was able to do for Predictive, it wasn't very hard for me to do that transition, and take that ownership. But I
Right.
know that's not the case always, right? So I think, um, if you don't have that from, the previous owner or your business partner, it's just gonna take a lot of boundary setting, and saying, okay, I'm the boss now, kind of thing, and this is how I want to do things. I want your feedback. Let's work together, but this is the direction I want to go. You put me here in this position for a reason, and that reason is that you believe in my capabilities as a leader. So let's do that. Let me do that, and let me try, because a lot of this is going to be trial and error, right? You're going to try one thing, like the example I gave you about going with the direct client. That didn't work, right? So some things are going to work, some things are not. But
Yeah.
that allowing that space for the learning process, it's important. And that doesn't always happen because you want to grow very fast. But if you grow very fast, you can fail very fast as well.
It's true. Yeah, you become a tree with no roots, right?
Yeah,
One bad situation comes along and you don't have the foundation to be able to survive that. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's that's great. That's great input. What about just in terms of your leadership and going through this process?
Mhm.
What would you say in building a startup and getting it to this point where you did it within the company and then now you're doing it outside the company in your own? What would you say has changed in your perspective about leadership? Going through that process, how have you changed as a leader?
That is a great question. That it is lonely here. Once you reach this level, you notice that there's nothing else, no, or nobody else to vent, right? You become that person who's absorbing all of the challenges, all of the problems, and working through solutions. But there's nobody else that you can call and be like, oh, I'm just so stressed today. So it gets a little lonely in the leadership realm. So that is one thing I was not expecting. Yeah, having a support group, even if it's outside of work, that you can just, uh, talk to and vent to, I think it's good for your mental health. Because you're handling a lot. Another thing that is related to this is the fact that, I'm a female CEO who is also a mother of two little kids. So balancing things out can be sometimes very challenging. So creating an environment where there's flexibility and there's benefits, not just for me, but for everyone on the team, to accommodate, has been kind of challenging, but also important, right? To also cultivate the culture there. But I would say those two are the top top ones for me.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And it's a very real struggle. I think it's always interesting when people have that challenge as a CEO. They knew what the challenge was like as an employee.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always very hard. But then there's the added requirement of you feel like you have to do that for other people and you want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you create that kind of an environment. So it does add double stress, to the fact that I was already dealing with being a mom
Yeah.
and or a dad with multiple kids and trying to keep up with that. Um, so yeah, that gets into the entire, you know, environment of what kind of a place do we want to have here.
Mm-hmm.
Did you carry over any of the cultural aspects of the previous company? Because it sounded like you had a pretty great founder who obviously has good eye for talent and then identified, and gave you that kind of vision. Do you do that with your team? Like, have you identified people on your team that you go, hey, you're going to be next?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have a lot of people that have lots of potential. So like I said, we have different entities under one umbrella. So we develop kind of a holding company, and then we have all these different entities. So our benefits and the way we operate is very, very similar. So we pay 100% for health insurance. We
Hmm.
have unlimited PTO. We have 20 weeks of maternity leave. Mental health services, you name it, a bunch of things that are the same
Yeah.
across the board for all eight entities. So yeah, we do keep a lot of that, and we have something that we call growth discussions every year. Now we're actually doing it twice a year just to make sure that we're providing feedback. Kind of in real time rather than just waiting until the end of the year to have those conversations. And those are developed for precisely that. We want to make sure that we're having those conversations with our teams, not just to evaluate their performance, but to ask questions about how are you doing here and where do you see yourself? We have, this company that does paid media, but we also have predictive that does data science, and we also have engineering, and we're developing more startups. So there are paths for our people to move, not just within our own company, but within our ecosystem, which is something that is kind of rare. And we've had examples of people who started as data analysts and now they're having their own startup at the CEO level. We've had people who started as a project manager for predictive and now they're engineers. So there's really no cap when it comes to moving around. If you have the intent and you put the effort to get your certification or whatever it is that you need to get there, we'll help you and we'll put together a plan for you to move in that direction.
Sounds like a pretty great environment and a great
We try to
opportunity for
take
your
care of
staff.
our people. We do really try to take care of our people because that's our biggest asset. So yes.
That's awesome. Well, Angeli, this has been so helpful. I hope that it gives some of our listeners the ability to think about how could we move from one kind of do everything organization into a portfolio mindset And we just appreciate the insights that you were able to offer. And thank you for being on the leaders list.
Thank you for having me. This was great.